And what was your branch of service?
U.S. Navy.
What was your highest rank?
E4, I was a lithographer.
And what general locations did you serve?
I was stationed in Memphis Naval Air Station for the first 2 years, and then I was given orders to report aboard the aircraft carrier USS Shangri-La, which was located in the Tonkin Gulf off the coast of Vietnam.
Okay. So were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted because I would have been drafted within 30 days. The first letter I got from my mother after I was in boot camp in the Navy was that my draft notice had come, so I missed being drafted by less than 3 weeks.
Okay. And where were you living at the time?
With my parents in South Windsor.
Okay. So why did you pick the Navy?
Several relatives, including my father and my brother, were in the Navy, so that was my first choice.
Okay, so tell me about your first days in service.
Well, I took a bus to New York City. We got sworn in New York City. Then they put us on a train, and the next morning we showed up at Great Lakes, Illinois, to boot camp. And I got off the bus and said goodbye world for the next 4 years, and got a buzz cut haircut. They just shave all your hair off in about 3 seconds, give you a bunch of uniforms, and you start doing all your physical fitness and all the other things required to be in the Navy.
Were you nervous? Were you excited? What was the feeling?
It was mixed feelings. I was very excited to serve my country, but it's scary at the same time. I'd never been away from home really much when I was growing up, so it was definitely an eye-opening experience, but I was ready for it.
So what was boot camp like?
It was intense, not like I had some friends that had joined the Marine Corps previously, and I heard some real scary stories about being a Marine in boot camp, and they were tough on you, but at the same time I was young and physically fit, so I was able to complete all the maneuvers without any problems. It was pretty long days and late nights, and you wrote all your letters from the moonlight in the room because they shut lights off and you're supposed to go to bed, and then that's when I'd write my letters home.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
I do not remember any names. No, I don't. I had only one throughout the whole 10 weeks, and I don't recall his name.
Was he particularly tough? Did he make an impression on you?
He was tough, but he was fair, and I could just tell that there was reasons behind. Whenever he told you to do something, there was a reason for it, and he wasn't just trying to be a hard guy. He had our best interests in mind, I think.
And
So,
where was boot camp?
Great Lakes, Illinois.
So did you feel once boot camp was over, or how long was boot camp?
10 weeks.
And did you feel prepared at the end
Yes.
of
Yeah. I went in, the rate I'd signed up for was to be an aviation jet mechanic, but you know how that goes. You sign up for whatever you want, and when they have an open slot, they put you wherever they need you. So I graduated from boot camp, and I got stationed at Naval Air Station, Memphis, Tennessee, which is the largest naval training facility in the United States, and they put me in ship's company is what they called it. It was permanent personnel, and I went into the print shop, and I became what they call a lithographer. I printed, back then you had what they call an offset printing press, and you would print a lot of documents, and so I learned how to do that, and I did that for 2 years in Memphis. So I was what they call permanent personnel, and because it was a school, so guys would go there for school for 2 or 3 months, and then they'd go off to another base and another goal, but I was there for 2 years.
So what kind of documents did you print?
Administrative, training procedures, all kinds of information used in the training facility. There was about 17,000 men going to school there, and they all needed to have handouts for what the class documents were like, and what they wanted the students to learn. We printed tests and things like that.
What did you think of the work there? Did you like it? Was it a nice base?
It was a very nice base. We had really nice barracks. Being ship's company, you know, little things make all the difference when you're in the military. Like, because everybody on the base was going to school, they all had to stand in line for chow, for all breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But being ship's company, we got to the head of the line, so we were hot stuff. You know, we'd say we're ship's company, and we'd walk right up to the front of the line, and there's 300 guys standing outside in the rain, waiting to eat, and we got to be up in the front of the line, so we were pretty hot stuff.
They didn't give you a hard time for that?
They knew that ship's company had priority.
Okay.
I don't know why they let us, but we didn't argue for sure. Who wants to wait in line? That's one of the famous lines, and whenever you're in the military, the thing you do more than anything else is wait in line. Hurry up and wait, is what they say.
Mm-hmm. So, what was a typical day like there?
We had to be at work at 7, so we had to get up and shower and shave, as they always used to say, and get your breakfast in and be to work by 7, and work right through till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then they had 4-section duty, so once every 4 days you had to stand a 4-hour watch, whatever they signed you up for. And sometimes it was what they call roving patrol. They put you in a pickup truck and you drive around and check the locks on all the buildings on the base, because the base was huge. The base was probably 500 or 600 acres, and there was all kinds of different buildings, and we'd have to go around and check all the locks, and hey, we had a piece of paper we had to sign off that we checked them all. And so it kind of gave you a sense of I'm doing something to make sure nothing happens to anybody. I'm in a security patrol, and while everybody else is sleeping, I'm making sure everybody's safe, you know, kind of a thing. So they kind of instill that in you. And it was sometimes it was standing over a telephone and being ready to answer a call. If somebody called in and needed an emergency, you would patch them through to the proper people. And they taught you a lot of fire training, and you go to fire school. And you know, fires, especially on a ship, is so devastating that it was very important to learn fire control. Everybody was a fireman, really, as their second job, because when you're on a ship in the middle of the ocean, if you have a fire, everybody's going to die. So that was very important. But so it gave you a sense of meaning why you were there. You always had a job to do that, in an overall sense, protected everybody else that didn't have to stand watch, because they knew somebody was up there doing it for them, and everybody got their turn to do it.
So, I'm assuming you had some downtime while you were there, so
Yeah,
what did you do in your
we
downtime?
played a lot of sports. Played softball and basketball. I was a big pool player back in my Navy days, and I say with 17,000 men on the base, I won a pool tournament while I was there. So I was the best pool player out of 17,000 men. So that was a feather in my cap. And I had my own car down there, and Memphis, the town of Memphis, was about 20 miles away, and there was always a bus to take people into the city. And if I wanted to make a few bucks, of course gas was 40 cents a gallon back then, I would just pull up to the bus stop in my car, and with another buddy of mine, we'd fill our back seat with guys, and we'd charge them $2 a piece to drive into Memphis so they could, you know, hit a bar or something. And so there was always a way to make money. We used to go to the local hospital and give blood, and they used to pay us, I think, $10 at the time to give blood, and $10 was a lot of money back then. So I did a lot of sightseeing. I'm a Civil War buff, and we went to a lot of Civil War sites and walked the battlefields and read all the plaques and everything. So it was very interesting to live in a different part of the country and kind of soak in all the different cultures that are different from our culture up here in New England.
Mm-hmm. So when you went into Memphis, did you go in uniform, or did you go in?
Yes, you always traveled in uniform. wasn't a military flight, but they gave you a military discount when you wore your uniform when you had to make flight arrangements. So we always flew in uniform and had our sea bag over our shoulder. And so it was, again, every time I moved to a different place, it was a new chapter in life, and I just took it in stride and thought, good, we're gonna have an adventure here now. So, you know, some people get scared, and I just looked at it from that point of view.
So when you were walking around in uniform around civilians, how did they act toward you?
For the most part, it was good. I've been literally spit on in a few, when I came back from Vietnam. They weren't very nice to me. But it was a lot of religious groups. They would, you know, these off-the-wall religious groups are trying to give you a book and ask for a donation, and you know, if you just kind of cast them aside, they would have some very nasty remarks to you, and you know, baby killers and stuff. Everybody's a baby killer, of course, because we had Tet Offensive, and so of course everybody in Vietnam was involved somehow, you know, in their eyes. So it was.
And that was while you were in Memphis on the base? People were reacting that way?
No,
At that time?
I didn't see anything until I was on my way to Vietnam and on my way home from Vietnam, because I was on a lot of flights and a lot of airports. I must have hit 7 or 8 airports on my way to Vietnam. And our ship got back to Florida after our tour, and I flew home, and it could have been a lot worse, but I do remember some. That's all you remember is the bad stuff, it seemed, you know.
Right. Okay, so you were at the Naval Air Station in Memphis for 2 years, and
Yes.
then what?
Then I knew my 2 years was up, and I got my orders from my commanding officer, and it said to report to the USS Shangri-La in the Tonkin Gulf in Vietnam. And that's all my orders said. So after my 2-year stint, I got a 30-day leave, so I went home to my house in Connecticut and spent 30 days leave and caught up with some friends that had also been in the military. And then I had all my flight plans to get to Vietnam, so I flew from Connecticut to California and caught a military plane, and that flew from California to Hawaii, my first time in Hawaii. I had a beer at the airport. It cost $5 in 1970. That's like $45 today.
That's crazy.
And then we flew to Guam just to get refuel, and we ended up in Clark Air Force Base in the Philippine Islands. And I stayed overnight there for 2 nights. And short story, they stay in they call it TDY, temporary barracks. And so you check in, you got your paperwork with you, and you give your paperwork to the officer of the day, and he goes, oh, there's some temporary barracks over there, go, you know, put your stuff away, you're gonna be here until a plane comes and gets you. I don't know how long, it's gonna be a day or 2. So as soon as I walk out of his office, this little Filipino boy comes over to me. He was like 8 years old, and he takes my sea bag off my shoulder, and he's, you know, he can't even carry the thing. The sea bag's bigger than he is. And we walk over to the barracks, and he's walking behind me, dragging my bag. And so I'd been in the plane all day long, so I jump in the shower and I come out, and all my nice clean uniforms are all laid out on a bed, and he'd shine my shoes. And he didn't speak very, very good English. We couldn't really have a conversation, but I reached in my pocket and I gave him a quarter. And he said, no, too much, too much.
Oh my goodness.
And he probably fed his family for a week on 25 cents.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
So you really learn a lot about third world countries when you're over there. And it really struck me. And so I stayed there 2 days, and then my next flight picked me up and dropped me in South Vietnam in Da Nang. And I was there for 6 days waiting for a plane. The mail plane comes in once a week and drops off, picks up mail and brings it out to the guys on the ship. And then I was waiting for that plane to come and pick me up, and I flew out, ended up flying out in the ocean and landing on top of the aircraft carrier, which was really cool, really cool. But the barracks I stayed at while I was in Da Nang, there was a helicopter pad right next door to my barracks, and the officer of the day said, whenever you hear a chopper come in, you go outside and you unload the chopper, and it was body bags. And we unload anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 body bags, and of course they'd come right back from the LZ, and the guys out in the field, you know, they just got through getting shot at, so they're not really particular about it. So the bags were only half zipped up, and body parts are falling out. It stuck with me. And I felt bad about it, in the fact that I had some friends that saw a lot of action, and a couple of friends I lost over there. And I never felt like I had a right to feel bad about that, because I wasn't in conflict. I didn't fire a gun. I didn't kill anybody. And for about 35 years after the war, I didn't associate with any organizations or anything. I just kept it all in. And finally I started going to the VA and getting a physical every year. And the nurse asked me one day if I'd like to talk to somebody about my experiences, and I just let it all out. It was tough. I finally come to terms with it, but that was my experience being over there. That was enough for me, you know. So the whole experience, I still say, was the best 4 years of my life. All my experiences over there and all the places in the world I got to see, being a 20-year-old kid, I got to see half the world over there, especially on my way home on the ship. So it was, all in all, a great experience. And it's done a lot for me, being the person I am today, because of the experiences I've seen. So that was good.
So how long were you actually in Vietnam?
7 months.
7 months.
Yeah, I got there in August. Well, maybe it wasn't 7. August till December. We got back to Jacksonville, Florida, about a week before Christmas, so maybe it was 5 months. So we do a line period, which was 30 days. So our job was to load up bombs on all the planes we had on our ship, and they did flight ops 12 hours a day. So they would fly over Vietnam, and they'd be talking to somebody on the ground saying, here's your coordinates, there's North Vietnamese here, fire your guns and drop your bombs on them. We do that all day long for 12 hours, and then we come back and have 12 hours off, and we do the thing 7 days a week, dropping bombs on people. So, and what my job was on the ship was, again, being a printer, and we printed all the I had a secret clearance when I was in the Navy, so we printed all the top secret and secret documents that went to all the ships in the 7th Fleet, because our ship was one of the ships in the 7th Fleet. So any documentation, anything that needed to get out to the other ships so they could all be on the same page and synchronized, we printed it, and then they would be mailed or flown over to all the other ships that were in our fleet. We always had a group of ships following us, destroyers and cruisers and supply ships and things following us all the time. So it was a cool experience. We could get up on the island on the 07 level, and you could look out and you could see all the ships that were following us, and you felt like, man, this is a cool thing to be a part of, you know. And you kind of step outside of it and look and see what's going on. And of course, we never knew what was going on the land. But I said that was our job, was just to support the Army and the Marines that were fighting on the ground. We'd give them air support. So I kind of found that out after the war. I just knew they were flying off the ship with bombs on them. I never really put 2 and 2 together that those bombs were killing people every day. But,
So your ship didn't actually see any battles, or didn't?
no, because the Vietnamese didn't have any
Right.
Didn't have any ships or anything, so we were just support for the ground crews.
So how did you stay in touch with family?
Wrote letters. That's one thing I talk about when I go to the high schools, to talk to the kids these days. You know, now they have computers and FaceTime and all this stuff, and we'd write letters to anybody we could ever think of that we'd ever met in our whole lives, because mail call was the highlight of your day and your week and your month. So I'd write my parents and my aunts and uncles and my brothers and my friends that were still back home, high school buddies, and I have probably 30 or 40, 50 letters downstairs that I've kept, and from different people. And just catch up on the world, and they want to see how I'm doing, and I want to see what life is like back in the States, and kind of kept you grounded and kept you in touch, and it made you feel like you're a regular person rather than just being so isolated, being on a ship 3,000 miles away, you know. But I never really got homesick. I just said, this is a part of my life I'm never going to forget, and I'm going to enjoy it to the fullest. And it was always good to get home.
Did you receive any awards or medals?
Vietnam Conflict Medal, the Service Medal. They're about the only ones they gave out. I didn't get anything above and beyond.
Okay, so in terms of daily life, what was the food like there?
It was really good, actually. They had, you know, they weren't chefs really, but they were cooks, and they had eggs, especially because after every 30-day line period, you'd go back into port, and they'd resupply the ship while we were taking our leaves and our times ashore. So for the first 4 or 5 days, you had fresh milk, and you'd have eggs and bread, and then after that stuff ran out, where the expiration dates would go out, we'd have powdered milk and powdered eggs and that kind of stuff. So that kind of got a little bit old, but we would buy supplies when we were at shore and put a few things in our lockers and things, so we'd have some food. And they had a PX, which was kind of a ship store on board, and you could buy candy bars and soda and that kind of stuff. You couldn't drink on board ship, but you get candy bars and cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. So we had downtime. We played a lot of cards. Pinochle was a favorite game, and I'm a big cribbage player, so I had a couple of buddies we played cribbage. And there was even some basketball hoops up in the hangar deck, which is the deck where they repaired the planes. And we'd shoot hoops every once in a while and watch flight operations. We'd sit up in the island and watch the planes come in and take off, and it was very interesting to watch the guys. Everybody had a specific job on board the ship, because if you forgot what you were doing and did something wrong, there's a real serious chance that you'd get blown off the side of the ship. And if you did, if the helicopter wasn't there, they wouldn't turn around. They would just keep going. So it was 75 feet from the flight deck to the water, so usually the fall would kill you anyway. So we lost 7 pilots while I was on board the ship. We have steam-operated catapults that launch the planes off, because, you know, even though a ship's so big, a jet needs a long distance to be able to fly. So they have these spring-loaded catapults that you get hooked up to everything, and then there's a guy on the flight deck, and he's waving. You rev up your engine as fast as you can, and then he gives you the okay to go, and the catapult gives you a little extra propulsion, so when you fly off the bow of the ship, you can keep going. And they were steam operated, and one night we were all in bed. It was about 10, 11 o'clock at night. There was a big scraping noise. We'd hear something scraping right along the bottom of the boat, and it was what they call a dead shot. The steam didn't build up enough, and when they launched the plane, the pilot's at full throttle. So when he tells you to go, you take off, and the steam catapult is supposed to catapult you off the bow of the ship so you can fly. And there was no steam there, and he went right off the end of the ship. And he went straight down, and the ship ran over him, and he had 400 or 500-pound bombs on it. And we were thankful that they didn't explode underneath the ship, because it would have put a hole in the ship. Got about 100 yards off the stern, and the plane blew up with the pilot inside it. So, and then we had another accident. The plane was landing, and they have 4 cables that go across the rear of the ship, and there's a hook that's hanging on the plane. And when the pilot lands, that hook catches on one of the cables, and it just stops you. And then the guy with the baseball bat comes out, and he whacks that hook off the back of the cable, so that the plane can get up and land and taxi up to the front of the plane, so the next jet can come in and land. And so you come in, you catch the cable, the guy with a baseball bat knocks the hook off the cable, and then you need like full throttle to drive the plane, even though it goes slow, up to the front and park it somewhere. Well, he blew a tire when he landed, and so when he hit the throttle on his jet, it jerked at 90 degrees, and he was only like 10 feet from the side of the ship, and he went right off the side of the ship in his plane. And they teach you to eject. Well, when the plane went off the side of the ship, it also turned 180 degrees, and he was facing, the cockpit was facing the ship, and he ejected at 90 miles an hour right into the side of the ship. And so he was gone. So now you lose the plane, you lose the pilot, and then we had a guy, he was an aviation jet mechanic, and he was working on the planes. The hangar deck is the deck below the flight deck. They have an elevator, so if the jet needs work, you put it on the elevator, and then it drops down into the next level, and then the mechanics work on the plane and fix it so it can go back up and fly again. And one of the mechanics was sitting in the cockpit of the plane, and he inadvertently hit the eject button, and he ejected. You're 90 miles an hour when you leave the ejection seat, and it's only 15 feet to the ceiling, so 90 miles an hour, he hit a steel ceiling. And we walked by about 15 minutes later, and all there was a pool of blood. I mean, it was, and you know, I didn't see that, but you know, you lose people, and it's tough, but you're in a war, you know, and that's very hard, but it's not as hard as losing your buddy you've been talking to 5 minutes ago that gets shot by a North Vietnamese. You know, that was always the toughest.
So how did you deal with the stress and these tough things when you were there?
Well, like you say, after every 30 days, you'd go back to the base, and if you didn't have duty or watch, you'd go into town and hit a few bars, you know, and do some sightseeing. And you know, most of the guys would go in and spend all their money in bars and girls, but I like to see some of the countryside, so I hung out with some guys that had similar interests as me, and we'd do some sightseeing. We went to Manila one day. We rented a taxi. I think it cost us $3 to go 15 miles, and we went to Manila, and Manila was like the city in the Philippines, and it was modern by their standards. It was still, they'd have a main street with some shops and things like that, but you walk behind the main buildings off Main Street, and there's grass huts, and they didn't even have bathrooms over there. There would just be a shovel sticking in the ground, and there'd be, somebody would dig a hole, you know, this wide and this deep, and you're walking back there to go to the bathroom, and there's a woman there, you know, she's just going to the bathroom. They don't even, you know, they aren't even embarrassed or anything, and there's a woman leaning over, and there's two guys standing up, and they're just going to the bathroom, and you know, we're not used to that, but that's their way of life. And so you learn about different people's cultures, and eating some of their foods is very different, and I love to try different kinds of food. So I learned a lot, and that's one of the reasons helped me cope with things, is to learn how people live and experience those things, and come away with, you know, either they're doing a good thing, or they're third world, and they're so far behind us, and makes you appreciate where you live even more. So that was all good stuff.
So did you always feel that you had enough supplies when you were on board? Did you guys ever start running low, or with the 30-day in and out, you...
With the 30 days and out, you knew that you always had enough things on board to make it last until the end of that particular line period. No, we never did without it. I know, writing letters to some of my buddies in the Army and the Marine Corps, you know, the food was lousy. Even when you're at an American base, the food was lousy in the Army. I don't think they wanted you to have good food, because they knew that when you were over in Nam, you're never going to get any good food, so they wanted to start as early as they could to prepare you for it. But in the Navy, they always said, if you want good food, join the Air Force or the Navy, and they were right. It was always had everything we needed.
Did you see any USO shows?
No.
What did you think of your fellow servicemen, or the officers?
It was a mixed bag. I found that the higher ranking people that had come up through the ranks, that had started, you know, as an E1 and worked their way up, had a better appreciation of their new job and how to treat the people below them. A lot of the officers that just graduated from NCO school came in and they were going to change the whole world, and they didn't have any experience in how to direct people and how to deal with people. They just learned from school and from books, and sometimes the knowledge doesn't work in the real world. And so most of my experiences were very good, but I know some of the people, I was having a tooth pulled, and the doctor, of course, was an officer, and I said, actually, he was trying to grab the wrong tooth and pull it out, and I said, hey, that thing hurts, don't do that. That's the wrong tooth. And he goes, you mean sir, don't you? And I'm there, I'm sitting in a chair having a tooth pulled. Do I have to call you sir? I mean, just do what you have to do, you know. But he was all, you know, uppity about being an officer, so I go, really? You know, you have to treat me like that? He wanted to make sure I knew that he was higher than me and quote unquote better than me. We all got a job to do. You do it to your best ability, and I think that's all anybody can ask for.
Do you recall any funny or unusual events while you were there?
We pulled into a port in Hong Kong on our way home, and having a three-piece suit was just, that was a big thing for everybody. They wanted to go home and have a tailor-made suit. So we pulled into Hong Kong, and we got off the ship, and we went right to a tailor shop, and you know, the little Oriental man, he's got the tape measure, and he's measuring your legs and your chest and your waist and everything, and you come back tomorrow. I bought a pinstripe, dark gray, three-piece suit with a vest, pants, jacket, shirt, and a tie. It cost me $17. And it was all tailor-made, and back then you had your pants tailored right to the knee, really tight, and then you had the bell-bottom pants, because that's what everybody wore back then. And so we put them on the ship, and we were walking around some of the different areas and showing everybody our uniforms, until an officer came by and said, you're out of uniform because you're not allowed to wear civvies on a ship. But so we had a good time doing that, and we played a lot of music from that era. We had reel-to-reel tape recorders. That was the way you listened to music back then. So I was in Hong Kong again, and I bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder with outside speakers, and then we'd tape music off the radio, and then we'd listen to all our favorite songs while we were playing pinochle. And one night we stole some beer off one of the ports we were in, and we put it in a kind of a suitcase thing, and we had to sneak it on board. So the officer of the day, he kind of checked everybody as you came back up the gangway to get back on the ship. I don't even remember how we did it now, but we had beer on the ship, and man, that was like, we had a couple of officers that used to come down and play cards with us, and we had a little mini refrigerator. And we're playing cards, and I looked at one of the officers and said, "Would you like a beer?" And he goes, "Of course I would, what do you mean would I like?" I go, "I have one." He goes, "Yeah, quit kidding with me." So I went in the refrigerator and I poured him a beer in a glass, and he looked at me like, "Holy cow." I mean, that was like so undercover kind of a thing. It was funny and it was risque, and you know, when you think about it today, wow, I poured somebody a beer and I weren't supposed to have one, you know, and that was a big deal back then. So he was a real appreciative. He'd take our cameras when he flew missions over now, he'd take pictures for us.
Okay.
That was pretty cool. So that's my funny stuff.
So, where were you, or when did you find out that you were going home? And then how did you feel?
Well, we finished our tour in Vietnam, and we had to pull into different ports on the way home because we didn't have enough fuel and everything. So the first port we went to was Hong Kong. Then we went to Japan for 8 days. Then we went to Sydney, Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand. So I got to see all these different parts of the world, and we were there for 5 days at a time. So you'd probably catch duty one of those 5 days and stand to watch, and then the rest of the time you were just sightseeing in Sydney, Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand, and Hong Kong, and Japan. And we went to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and there's a statue of Christ on top of a mountain up there, and we drove up to the top of the mountain and saw that, and went to Ipanema Beach, which is the most famous beach in the world. And so we got to sightsee, see a lot of different things. We had a cookout on the ship on the way back on the flight deck. All the airmen had left, so there were no planes left on the ship, just one helicopter, I think. And so they had a cookout. There was about 1,000 of us men, and they had steaks and baked potato flown in on the ship, and they had these 55-gallon drums, and they cut them in half, and they put charcoal in them, and they cooked steaks for everybody on the way back. So I even have a picture I'll show you later of all the guys standing up with their plates, and they're waiting for their steak. And so, you know, having a steak on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, not many people can say that. So that was cool. We got back to Florida. That was our home base. Mayport, Florida it was called. It was in Jacksonville. And it was about a week before Christmas. So I flew home for a week and reported back to the base, and they said, "We're looking for people." The ship, it was the last cruise the ship was going to be seeing. It was a World War II. It was the last aircraft carrier built in World War II. It was built in 1945. And so it was old for its day. And they said, "We're going to decommission it. We're going to decommission it in Boston Navy Yard." Of course, being from Connecticut, I volunteered. So I said, "Oh, because I can go home every weekend from there." So I said, "I'll go up there." And so I went up. The ship left Mayport. Of course, it takes about a week to get up to Boston, and I flew up there, and they had some barges with barracks on them. So I got those all cleaned up and ready for the guys that were going to be doing the decommissioning of the ship. And so I spent from January of '71 until May decommissioning the ship. We had to pull up all the tiles and paint all the inside of the walls and everything with what they call red lead paint. And it was a big mess. And then in May, they said, "Well, you're done with that now. One of two things. You can either transfer to another aircraft carrier and go to the Mediterranean, or you can get early out," because I'd already done 3.5 years. And of course, when you're in, all you want to do is get out. And I kick myself now because I would have gone on another aircraft carrier, seen the other half of the world, but you don't think about it that way when you're in. So I said, "I'll take the early out." So I did. I only had to do 3.5 years. And so I was ecstatic. You know, I'd done my time. I saw the world, and I'm ready to start my next chapter in life. So I got an honorable discharge.
And when was that?
May of '68. I'm sorry, May of '71. Went into '68.
So then, where did you go? Where was home?
Right here in this town of South Windsor. I lived with my parents for about a year and a half. And because I was a printer, I went to work at the Hartford Insurance Group in Hartford. Worked there for about 2.5 years. And I kind of figured that it wasn't the business I wanted to be in. And when I was in high school, before I joined the Navy, I worked in a military aircraft manufacturing plant right in South Windsor. It's called Dynamic Controls. And we made armament control panels for the F-15. So I'd worked there in high school for about 2 years. And so when I left the printing business, I called them up and I said, can I get a job over there? Because I already had experience there. And they said, sure. It was supposed to be a stepping stone for me for a year until I figured out what I wanted to do, and I ended up staying there 19 years. And so I was still involved in kind of a military thing, in the fact that all we did was build parts for military planes, F-15s, F-16s, and F-18s. And McDonnell Douglas out in St. Louis built the plane itself, the F-15, and they were having an inaugural flight of the F-15 in the mid-70s, and they flew me out to St. Louis, and all the presidents and all the powers to be were all in the bleachers, and 4 F-15s were on the airstrip, all painted red, white, and blue with stars on them, and they were doing the inaugural flight, and the F-15 was the latest and greatest plane of its day. And I was out there for support for the parts that we built for that plane. And sure enough, one of the jets gets up on the flight deck, or on the airstrip, and had a little problem in the cockpit. So I get called out in front of these 1,000 dignitaries, and I have to climb up into the cockpit of the plane and make a little adjustment on the part that I had made there. So I got to sit in the cockpit of an F-15 on its inaugural flight and make a few adjustments. I had a little bag of tools with me, and got back down, and everybody's clapping and everything, and I sat back down, and the planes took off, and they could fly to 35,000 feet in like 15 seconds. They were just crazy planes. And so that was my 5 minutes of fame.
So I know that you said earlier that you kind of had a tough time with some civilians when you got back. So what was day-to-day like? Was it tough to come from Vietnam and to just go back into everyday life? Or?
Yeah, the thing that when you talk to different people that had also been in the military, it was blend in as soon as you can. So you try to grow your hair back as long as you can. My sea bag is still up in the attic, and I've never opened it. I opened it once to get one of my hats when I've been in my grandchildren's school on Veterans Day, and I wear my Navy hat, the white one, the weird looking one, and I opened up my sea bag and pulled the hat out, and I wore it into class one day at my kids' grammar school in Ellington. And other than that, I've never opened it up. So I've got all my whites and my dress blues and everything in there. I'm thinking about I'd like to donate them to like a playhouse or something, somebody that might be doing something that was military related. Maybe they'd want the uniforms for something, so someday I'm going to do that. But it was just blend back into society, and don't let people know where you were, because nobody wanted to listen. And I didn't want to just hang around with veterans. I was a big softball player my whole life, and I played softball for the Army-Navy Club, which is on Main Street in Manchester. And there's only 2 Army-Navy Club. You'd think to be one in every city because it's an Army-Navy Club. There's 2 in the world. There's one in Montreal and there's one in Manchester, Connecticut. So I played ball for them for 15 years. And we'd go back after the games, we'd go back into the club, and all it was they had a banquet room for holding meetings and ceremonies and stuff, and then they had a bar, and that's kind of what all these places were for the military guys. And I saw a lot of people in there, and they'd come home from work, and before they got home to see their family, they'd always stop in and have a beer, and then of course it's another beer, and then it's another beer. And I saw that, and I go, and I was a member for about 10 years. And the only time I ever had a beer in there was with my softball buddies after a game. We'd have a pitcher of beer, and we'd split it, and I'd go home, and I said, I'm not gonna become one of those people that just drinks themselves into oblivion. And I think that's what a lot of people did. They tried to forget by using a bottle. And I said, I won't do that. I never did. So it was pretty easy transition. I say I didn't hang around with veterans, so I didn't have a lot of those conversations. And a lot of my new circle of friends were non-military, and we just kind of got on with our lives, and I got married and had a family, and just did all the day-to-day stuff.
So you didn't keep in touch with anybody that you met in the military? Any friends that you made?
I didn't. I had a roommate when I was in Memphis for 2 years. Of course, his name is Dave Wilson, which is a really common name, and I've been trying to find him. He went on the JFK, which is another aircraft carrier, at the same time I went on the Shangri-La. And we wrote a couple of letters, and then we lost touch, and I've been trying to find him for about 25 years, and I just can't find him. And I paid for sites on the internet to try to find him and locate him for me, and I knew what town he was from in Ohio, and I just can't locate him. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he's probably the only guy that I ever wanted to keep in touch with. I mean, I have other friends that when I'd go home on leave, somebody from school would be on leave, we'd go out and have a beer, but we never really talked about our military lives. We just talk about the times we had in school and stuff like that. So I think everybody kind of kept to themselves whatever they were experiencing. It's something you didn't talk about, and you just kind of keep whatever issues you had to yourself. It's not something you shared. That was my philosophy anyway.
So you didn't go to school on the GI Bill?
No. I worked my whole life. I ended up being in middle management. I was a facilities and purchasing manager at 3 different companies in my last 30 years, and done well. My wife and I, she did some college, and she worked in the insurance companies in Hartford for a while, and we've done well. We've been retired for half a dozen years, and the house has been paid for 20 years, and we've got a nice nest egg, and we're comfortable in retirement. And I don't think a lot of people can say that at our age anymore. It's just people still have large bills to pay and didn't plan well when they were young, and if you don't start young, it's so hard to catch up. So I'm enjoying this last chapter in life, and enjoying the grandkids and all my hobbies, and I'm fortunate to have a lot of different hobbies. I turn bowls. I made this bowl. I turn it on a lathe, and I do a lot of work with the veterans. And my therapy dog, we visit a lot of veterans. I go to Newington Children's, the veterans home in Rocky Hill, and visit with the veterans there, and the veterans that don't have it so good, sometimes.
So the work that you do with your dog, is that through an organization, or you do that on your own?
Through an organization.
Well, which organization?
It's called Healers with Halos, and it's a dog therapy group. There's about 70 of us in our group, and we go to nursing homes and children's hospitals, and just visit people and try to make their lives as comfortable as possible. I'm also a hospice volunteer with ECHN out of Vernon, and being in the military and doing woodworking and having a therapy dog, they try to match me up when they get a new customer to come in that's on hospice. They match them up with somebody within the organization that has similar interests. And so I've been doing it for about 7 years now, and I've had a lot of veterans and a lot of people that like dogs, and so I go to their home or a hospital wherever they happen to live and just spend an hour with them and swap stories about the military, and they pet the dog, and we just talk about different things, and some of you establish relationships for 6 or 7 months. I've had cases where I met somebody once and the next day they passed away. So you get all those different things, and it's tough, but I look at it as I've satisfied somebody's request to have somebody come and talk to them for a while, and so I feel a lot of comfort in that, and so I take it the right way. And last week I lost a patient, and I took Georgia to the wake, and the family was there, and they were so appreciative because they'd heard that I brought my dog to visit their father in his last days, and I went into the hospital the night before he passed and put Georgia up on the bed with him, and that kind of stuff. So they're so appreciative, and of course, being a therapy dog, anybody that likes dogs, they just surround her, and she's such a good girl that she gets a lot of interest. So I'm giving back, and I'm hoping maybe somebody will do that for me someday when I need it.
Now, what other, and you said that initially you didn't join any veterans organizations, but you're a member of organizations now?
I'm a member of the American Legion Post in South Windsor, Post 133. Been there about 7 or 8 years now. When I retired, I started doing Meals on Wheels at the senior center in town here, and I get a monthly newsletter, and they said there's veterans from the American Legion Post that come in, and they can talk to you and maybe give you some insight as to some events that might be going on, or some incentives for you to, being in the military, some things that might be of interest to you. So I went down and talked to them, and the guy that was down there, I graduated from high school with him. So he told me about the Post, and the next week I was a member. And so we raise money for Wreaths Across America, if you've ever heard of that. You ever heard of Wreaths?
Yes.
We raise money we put a wreath on every veteran's grave in South Windsor, and there's about 1,100 of them, going all the way back to the Civil War. And so we raise money for that. We have a car show every year that we raise money for, and we give money to needy veterans in town. If there's any veterans that are kind of struggling, we pay their oil bill, or we'll give them a gift card for grocery stores and things like that. So we do a lot within the community. We support the other community groups in there. So we have a monthly meeting for that. And the hospice is another takeoff from that. And the therapy dog group I belong to is another meeting every month for that. And I do wood turning. There's another monthly meeting for that. So every week I go into a different meeting. And I don't want to overextend myself. When I join up for something, I want to make sure I participate. Some people just pay their dues and don't associate with it. But I like people to know that I'm there and put my 2 cents worth in. So that's a pretty full life, I think.
It seems like it's certainly.
Yeah.
Have you attended any reunions?
I went to my 50th class reunion 3 weeks ago from Manchester High School.
Oh, okay.
First one I've ever been to. And it was pretty cool. We had a big class. Our class was 500 kids. So, all schools get cliquey, so you only knew a certain group of people. But I caught up with probably 10 to 12 people that we had friendships in school, and they were really hung on to them after that. Went our own way. And so it was fun sharing stories and sitting down, and it was pretty cool. Yeah.
So how has your military experience affected your life?
I think in every positive way possible. I learned from the military with the things that I saw and experienced that my words are, don't sweat the small stuff. You hear people calling into talk shows, and I remember one silly one, I go to this woman's house and the toilet paper comes off the roll at the bottom, and I keep telling her to put it on the top, and she never listens to me. And you go, really? You're worried about something like that? And just the little things about, I only sweat the big stuff and let little stuff go. And with my experiences, I think I lead a good life, and I teach my grandkids a lot of things. I do a lot of museums and nature walks, and we used to be a farm back here behind my house, and we brought a rake out there and we dug up some old glass bottles, you know, because every farm kind of had a little corner of their property where they threw all their junk. So we found some glass bottles from the 1800s, and I dug up a canteen. It said USMC 1944. So somebody in that family was in the Marine Corps, and it was a canteen that was used in the war. And my granddaughter, she was just beside herself. She goes, "Grandpa, you found this for me?" And she took it to class and at school and did show and tell. So those are the kind of things we'd like to teach them. Anything but computers, and we don't watch movies, and we're always outside doing things. And I take them fishing. We rent a cottage every year in a lake in Maine, and I'm a big bass fisherman. So we bring the kids up and take them out to boat fishing and those kind of things, kayaking. So I've just lived my life, and I say so many days that the reason I am the way I am is because of my experiences in my younger life. My father grew up on a dairy farm in New Hampshire, and I used to go up and spend the summer on a dairy farm, milking cows and bringing in the hay, and you know, they'd go to town once a month to get their supplies. Otherwise, they lived off the land. They killed a cow every once in a while to have beef. And a story I like to tell: sitting down having dinner one night, and I said, "Boy, Aunt Barb, this meat is really good." And my cousin was my age next to me, and he goes, "Yeah, that's Liza." You know, and so it was just so matter of fact. If you did that today to the young kids, they'd need therapy, because you named a cow and then you killed it, and then you're going to actually eat it. But that's the way of life. They'd raise them as calves. They'd show them at the 4-H fairs. They'd milk them for 10 years. They would die. And they'd end up on a dining room table. Is there anything wrong with that? Not in my eyes, but if the kids today thought that, they would, you know, they'd have to go to therapy for a year. So it's a whole different lifestyle today. But no, I really appreciate the life I had in the military and the wisdom and the mindset that it gave me. I am very proud of that.
So is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't touch upon?
I think we hit just about everything. It was, when I joined the Navy in '68, it was the only time in history that they drafted people into the Marine Corps. It was the only year. And they were so desperate for people to get over there, but some of the friends that I had that had gone in the Army because they said, "Oh, either I want to fight with a gun, or I don't have any other choice, or I don't know what else there is." And literally it was 10 weeks of boot camp, and they'd give you an M16, they'd fly over Vietnam, go out in the jungle and kill somebody. And that was their philosophy. And I go, "You're not going to live very long." I mean, if you were in the Army, they had life expectancies by what your MOS was. If you were on patrol in the jungle with a gun in your hand, your life expectancy in Vietnam was 7 days. So it's not like, well, there's a 50-50 chance you're coming home. There's almost a 0 chance you're going to come home, because you're in the jungle and you're fighting the North Vietnamese, and they were a very intelligent army. I've been reading a lot of books on Vietnam and World War II especially, and learned a lot of things about it. One thing I just wanted to share, my name is Dayton, and it's a very strange name. I've only met 3 people in my life with that name, and I was named after my uncle, my mother's youngest brother, and he was killed Christmas Day in the Battle of the Bulge, 1944. And it's on my bucket list to go over and visit his gravesite over there. He's buried in a Belgium cemetery over there, military cemetery. So I have all his memorabilia in a box. He'd gone to 3 years of college, and then he wanted to participate in the war, so we joined up, and he was a radioman And he got the Bronze Star for heroism over there when he died. So it's kind of, my father was the last one to see my Uncle Dayton. They were in England together, and my father was in the Navy over there, and then he died. He was killed about 3 weeks later. So there's a lot of military background, and so you want to continue the tradition, I think. So that's my story. Hope it didn't bore you.
Oh no. Well, I'd like to thank you for your service and for taking the time to be interviewed today.